All right, welcome back to Sorare. This is where I tell you to like and subscribe, and then let's just get right into Game Week 24. It's starting in the micro tier. We're looking at Juan Toscano Anderson. He is a 3L10 heading into next week. Guys, this low just normally don't play at all. 14 and 16 minutes the last two nights. This is something worth monitoring over the weekend. If you want to pick one up now, they're really cheap. You can get them $1.30 for the lowest right now. In a very similar vein, Corey Joseph is going to be a 4 next week. I think this guy's got a 15 or 20 in him. At a 4L10, you're just looking for guys who are playing. Right now, he's still under $2. So far, I have not heard any news on Clint Capella's injury. If he is still out, Bruno Fernando at 7 becomes a great play. Bruno Fernando plays the backup center. He usually gets about 15 minutes. He's had games where he scored in the mid to upper 20s. Right now, you can pick him up for $2.07. But we are still awaiting word on Capella. If Capella is in, I would say he is a no-go. Ochai Agbaji, pretty unproductive at 0.67, but he's an 8L10 heading into next week. This is a guy who is still playing. Not as many minutes as he was early in the year. Utah started to play a lot better. He's still in that 10 to 15 minute range most nights. He can beat an 8 pretty easily on a given day. Right now, his last year's card is going for $2.85. I would be a little careful with Jacob Gilyard in Memphis. He's on a two-way deal. I'm not sure how many games they can play him before they have to make him a guaranteed NBA contract. He's an 8 right now. With Marcus Smart going down, I think he is going to get an opportunity in the short term. With an 8, it really doesn't take a whole lot. Right now, you're looking at 1 under $4. I'm always watching JaVale McGee. This weekend, I would be out into next week. I will see what happens this weekend. If he does get some minutes this weekend, maybe we can trust him going forward. 1.09 points a minute, so it doesn't take many minutes. Right now, you can get him under $2 as well. With all the wing injuries in Atlanta, Trent Forrest is getting an opportunity. He's played quite a bit the last couple games. 18 minutes last game, 14 the two before that. Come up with 15 points, 14 points, 10 points. We're going to watch him over the weekend. We're going to find out if he's actually going to stay in the rotation. And if he does, I think he's still playable at 8. Very cheap option for you, too. $1.64 right now. Got a touch on Thad Young right here. 9L10. Last two games have been really impressive. 34 and a 19. So we'll see if he can keep that up. I have a feeling he could just fall right back into obscurity, though. I think Toronto's front court is still kind of up in the air. And he's much more expensive. Already up to $7. Doug McDermott came back from injury. He popped for a 20. He's an L10 of 9, up from 7. He is under $2 yet, so if you need a filler guy at a 9 next week, I'd say he's a viable option. Monty Williams never plays Marcus Sasser as much as I'd like. He's a 0.92 a minute, so pretty decent. 10 L10, below his season average. He's finally getting some minutes again. 10, then 18, then 16. A popular ad, though, at $6.55 currently. Jeff Green doesn't have Sasser's upside, and his price is actually a little higher than it normally is at $2.94 for the low. Miles McBride is really interesting, so he's taken over the backup point guard minutes in New York since the trade with Toronto. Minutes are definitely up since the trade. I've done a few calculations here. In the 4 games that Miles McBride has played since the trade went down, he's averaging 18.8 Sorare points, so his average is well up on his season average. 14 and a half, almost 15 minutes, so that's about 1.3 points per minute. Standard deviation of about 7. So you're looking at a high end in the upper 20s probably for him. At 10 L10, I think that's pretty good. Currently available for $3.48. Hawkins has played pretty well the last 2 games for New Orleans, but they were both blowouts, so I don't think you can bank on that going forward. L10's still pretty low at 11, but he needs the game to get out of hand to get some playing time. I'm going to pass on him this weekend. Right now, he's $7.26. That's too high for me. Kevin Huerter left in the first minute of Sacramento's last game with an ankle injury. He's already been ruled out for Friday. This would be a stash because he is much better than a 12, especially if he's going to get that starting role back, and he was in the starting lineup the last 2 games before his injury. So this would be a stash and hold, see if you can get him for cheap. Isaiah Joe had one nice game this last week. He only played 7 minutes in their last game, but it was a complete blowout. I think they beat Portland by 60. I think you can get him back in the regular rotation. He's easily better than 12. Daniel Tice in Los Angeles has a regular role. He can beat that 12 pretty easily. Drew Eubanks apparently has an illness. I recommended him for Sunday night's game against Portland, his old team. If he's not able to go, minutes are still kind of up in the air. Bol Bol actually had a nice game last night, so may want to pass on Drew Eubanks for now. Jordan McLaughlin's all the way up to a 12. We've been using him the last couple weeks. I think you're kind of at the end of your run with Jordan McLaughlin. Maybe a time to sell him. Killian Hayes at 13 is a really good play. He's just getting a ton of minutes, even though he's not a great player. He can easily beat a 13. Big variance at 10.7. season average of 20.5, so he can get into the low 30s pretty easily if he can knock down a couple of shots. Haywood Highsmith at 13, huge variance at 13. This guy just pops every once in a while. 16.5. I think he's capable of low to mid 30s as well. Mo Bamba in Philly. Embiid has been out the last couple of games. Embiid's already out for Friday night. But we're looking at next week. So Bamba all just hinges on whether Embiid plays or not. If Embiid's playing, I wouldn't bother with him. John Conchar in Memphis should get some more run. He can handle the ball a little bit. 0.85 a minute. Not bad. 13.8 on the season. He's at 13. He's beaten that by a little bit. 9.9 standard deviation. So he's a guy who pops and then duds and then pops and then duds. Those are the guys you like. Nemhard in Indiana. 13 is really low. He's going to be getting either starter minutes or close to that with Tyrese Halliburton out. I don't know how healthy he is, though. He's a game-time decision today. I would err on the side of TJ McConnell in this situation, even though McConnell's higher at like 21 right now. Dominic Barlow in San Antonio has been taken over since Zach Collins got hurt as the backup center. He's been getting some decent run. 0.95 points a minute is good. Unfortunately for him, his L10 is rising really quickly. He's getting small games off and replacing them with bigger ones. So I think he goes from 10 to 13, and then he's up to like 16 after that. So probably the peak of his usefulness was this past game week 23. By 24, he's still usable, but not as good. Isaiah Jackson at 14, I think you can definitely use him. If Jalen Smith continues to sit, Jackson gets all those backup center minutes. He's very productive at 1.27 points a minute. We talk about him all the time. 14 is just too low. Xavier Tillman in Memphis with Bismack Biyombo out of the equation. Tillman gets all the run at center. I think he stays in that high 20s minutes range most nights. 0.94 points a minute. 14 is just too low for this. Najee Marshall in New Orleans. I like him. 0.93 a minute. Really productive when he's in there. 14 L10 is just too low. This guy can pop for 28, 29. So Moses Moody is injured. Strained knee. Not sure how serious it is, but he's definitely out today. I would be careful with him. Grant Williams is pretty interesting. One of the biggest droppers this week. He's all the way down to 14. Heading into the next game week. So I think he's definitely available and you can use him in your lineups. Right now still available under $4. He's $3.50 for his cheapest card. $4.15 for this year. All right, on to the 16 to 20 range. Reggie Jackson in Denver is down to his lowest level in quite a while. Still a pretty productive guy at 0.95 a minute, has a regular role. DeLon Wright in Washington's really interesting. So he's a 16 this week. That L10 is just falling like crazy. Okay to play this week, but if we look at his game logs, he's a 16 rolling L10. I expect that to fall quite a bit as this one comes off the books, this 38-10. He's going to go all the way down to, say, 12 or 13. So just a guy to look into for the future. That's how you get ahead of the game. Nick Batum is playing big minutes again after coming back from injury. 16 L10, not super productive, but with minutes in the mid-30s, he'll have games where he beats that pretty easily. Santi Aldama in Memphis had an illness. He's been out. With all the stuff going on in Memphis and all the key players, they're losing to injuries. He's a point a minute. 17 L10s too low. If he can get his minutes back up into the high 20s, low 30s, which I think is very possible, I think he could be a good play for a number of weeks in a row. Nikola Jovic in Miami. Love this guy. 1.08 a minute. Really productive. Finally getting a real opportunity to play. Season average minutes 17. Lately, 20s and 30s. I think he could be a really good player, and if they're going to use him for this many minutes, I think he's worth rostering. Shaedon Sharpe, I'm missing Friday's game. Portland's kind of hard to trust right now. They seem to just getting blown out in the first half and then just completely giving up and pulling everybody. So I'd be real careful with Sharpe, but he's all the way down to 18. He's better than that. Lonnie Walker, we talked about. This week he'll have a couple of games. Finally again, he popped, which sucks because he was all the way down to 16 and it looked like he might go lower. And then he had the big game in Paris. So he's back up to 18 going into the next game week. I still think he's very playable. If we look at his game logs, as you can see, he can definitely get into the 30s. He's had a couple games in the 40s. We're looking at a pretty good play here. Some of these higher 30s are going to be coming off the books. Yeah, he's got a 29 and then a 38 that are going to be coming off. He's got all these low games. So if he's going to play some real minutes, he's going to be a valuable asset going forward. Cam Thomas in Brooklyn, he also had a pretty decent game in Paris. The L10's at 19. He's better than that. He's one of the highest variance players in the league. Season average of 28. We'll see what they give him going forward. Dario Saric in Golden State. Still not playing as many minutes as I'd like him to, but 1.08 is really good. L10 of 20. Herb Jones, New Orleans. been blowing people out, keeping that L10 low because he hasn't been playing his full amount of minutes. They're going to have some competitive games here and there. They're not that good. 0.84 a minute's not great, but okay. And this guy's always on the floor when they're in close games because they need his defense. Buddy Hield's been just brutally bad lately. His point per minute is still 0.95, so still very good. I think he's going to have some nice games. This is just another guy that's all over the place. 12.4 variance, 24 on average for the season. I'd say he can get into the 40s and even 50s if he gets hot. McConnell in Indiana, been the main beneficiary of Halliburton's injury. 21 for the coming game week. He can easily beat that. 1.24 a minute. They just need to give him 25 or 30 minutes and he's gold. Cole Anthony in Orlando played 7 minutes against the Timberwolves and then sat the rest of the game. Thigh injury, I think is what I was reading. 1.02 a minute's very good. Assuming he gets his minutes back to close to 30, I think a 22 is very, very beatable, especially with an 11.8 standard deviation. This guy can hit in the 40s pretty easily. D'Angelo Russell in LA, getting back in the regular rotation. If they don't trade him, if he's going to play 30 minutes, I think a 23 is very easy to beat for him. He's a guy that can score in the 40s and 50s sometimes. Spencer Dinwiddie, 23 is a low point for him. He was all the way up to like 38 a couple weeks ago. Trey Murphy in New Orleans. I remember when he came back, his L10 was in the high 30s. That was way over the top, but he's a good player. 1.01 a minute. 25 seems like a good spot for him. Walker Kessler in Utah, 1.09 a minute. Very good player, very productive if he can get some minutes. 24.1 on the year. I think he gets a few more than that going forward, so 26 is definitely not bad for him. Malcolm Brogdon and Jeremy Grant, same problem we had with the other guys in Portland. Are they going to play enough? Are they going to keep getting blown out and just sit the second halves of these games? Hard to say, but both of these guys are at a level where it's kind of hard to ignore them. Emmanuel Quickley has been great since he went to Toronto, averaging 37.8, 28 L10. He's just too expensive for me. Brook Lopez in Milwaukee, he's looked not great lately, but point a minute, they need him to be big, and he's certainly capable. 28 L10 is easy for him to beat. Daniel Gafford, same thing in Washington. It's just one of his lower points in a while. 11.4, good variance on him. He can beat that. Kyle Kuzma in Washington at 30, 12.5 variance. Season average is 35.6, so 30 is easily beatable for him. This guy can score you in the 50s. All right, covering those guys above 30 that are good values this week. Yusuf Nurkic and Derek White, both at 31. Both have fallen quite a bit. Nurkic has been surprisingly good for Phoenix this year. He's just vibing well with that group. Derek White, after a really good stretch, so he's down from the mid-40s all the way to the low 30s. Zion's at 32. I think you could play him here. Karl Anthony Towns is up a little bit from last game week, but still a good play at 33. Simons just had 2 terrible games, but like the other guys in Portland, do you trust him? He is the one guy I would trust in Portland because he's so capable of huge games. Jaren Jackson at 36. Morant out now. Marcus Smart out now. I think he's getting more usage as the season goes on. Damian Lillard, 37's as low as he's been in a long time. He's beating that by about 5 for his season average. He's due for a big game here pretty soon. De'Aaron Fox has had a couple lousy games. He just hasn't been the same guy since the calendar turned to 2024. Probably as low as you will see him at 40. I think he is a great play this week. He's bound to have another big game sooner or later. Desmond Bane takes over a lot of usage. He's at 41, certainly capable of 60s and some 70s this year. If you have a Jokic, it's always a good week to play a Jokic. We're going to wrap. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you watching. Good luck this week.